do a real quick reading. Here are your picks. Tips on these got destroyed because some castor oil spilled on them. Did you know that just castor oil would disintegrate whatever makes up colored pencils? Okay. Pick one, pick two, pick three. Pick one. What feelings are you suppressing? What feelings are you suppressing at this time? Let's see. You may be using some element of fantasy to suffice yourself or keep yourself like in balance. Like instead of living in the reality that you're in, you may be using some element of fantasy to comfort yourself. And it's not to say that it's not valid to imagine more for ourselves. But you know the difference between imagining a future for yourself and telling yourself a fantasy that you spend time living in with no action or intention on creating it into the reality. So that's the difference. Because imagination is absolutely a way to help manifest. And imagination is a very powerful tool to speak to the universe with. So the difference is fantasy is when you don't really believe it can happen. Fantasy is when you know you're telling yourself something that isn't real or true. So whatever you're telling yourself, if you were trying to manifest it, you're not in the right vibration around it because you have too much mixed in with it that says that it can't be real. And if you are just using a fantasy to suffice yourself, to comfort yourself, it's helping you avoid feeling something. And what it is the feelings that would go along with realizing that you are not as strong as you thought you were, that you are not as adept or capable in some certain aspect or skill or way that you've been living or belief that you've been having. You've been living in an inflated sense of self. So something that you, like, just as an example, because I know it can feel hard to be called out, I want to share an example from my own life. And what it is that at some point I was dealing with a particular person, and in my mind, I felt like I was a really good match for this person. And I couldn't fathom why this person couldn't see that in me. Because I was inflated and saw myself as the Empress. I saw myself as all the highest version of myself when I hadn't reached that yet. I was working on it, but I wasn't there yet. I still had lots to learn, and I wasn't really in Empress status in all ways. Maybe in a couple of little ways, but like not the way I saw myself, you know? So I was inflated on my own self-vision, and then the reality check was when I came into contact with this person and they didn't see me that way. And I was really shocked at first. I was really hurt. I felt very rejected. But then when I had to get real with myself, I had to realize, okay, well, why did I have this sense of entitlement towards being seen that way? What was must have been wrong about this, because it's not just that instance. That person isn't just not seeing me that way, but I'm also not getting certain results in my life that I thought I should get because of the status that I thought I had reached for myself. So it wasn't that just one piece of feedback clued me in. It was that I got real with myself and started looking in my life and realized, oh, well, if I was the Empress, then I would have been able to achieve this, this, and this. And I'm not there yet. I'm still kind of in process, right? So this inflated sense of self is a coping mechanism, and it's a fine one, right? But it's, at some point you have to like get real, right? And what that takes is being with yourself through some uncomfortable feelings. So then I had uncomfortable feelings about how I had been foolish. I was feeling a little bit embarrassed and a little bit humiliated, and I had to be the one who loved myself even though I felt humiliated, even though I was wrong. You know what I mean? So the feelings that you're avoiding are the feelings of humiliation, defeat, regret, weakness, feeling like we all have strengths and we all have weaknesses. So if we can't identify the weaknesses in ourselves, then they can be exploited by someone else. So it's really important to get real with ourselves and admit and know where our weaknesses are. It's actually a step in the direction of growth, learning, and becoming someone who cannot be exploited for their weaknesses, you know? Denial is a big theme of this, right? Because it's like just not being willing to see what is actually going on, what the reality is. And then the other way it can happen is that there may be a potential that you're looking for and wanting, but you remain in denial of the fact that the ingredients that you're putting into that don't equal that. You know? Like if you want something and you fantasize about it and you'd like to make it a reality, this is saying, like, what are the ingredients you're putting in this? Because you might be feeling a little bit entitled to that without realizing that if you want soup, there are certain ingredients for soup. You can't start with a rotten cabbage and think you're going to get a good soup. I mean, maybe, but you know what I mean? Like, this is saying, like, let's back up a step and, like, look at where you have kind of given yourself the idea that there's no more work to be done on that part, and so you're putting it into the ingredients of what you're trying to achieve, and it's actually an ingredient that will not allow you to achieve what you're trying to achieve. So this fantasy, you need some tweaking in the reality before you can achieve the fantasy. And when I first started talking about that in terms of fantasy, I was saying, well, a fantasy is when you don't believe it can happen. Well, a fantasy can also be something where you think it can happen, but you're not looking at the reality, and that is that you're actually putting in something into the mix that would prohibit it from happening. Let's use the example of, say you wanted a great relationship with someone, and you fantasized that this would be wonderful, that you'd be a perfect match, but maybe you're inflated in your sense of self because you haven't realized that, you're acting really possessive of that person, and you haven't dealt with things like jealousy or envy in yourself, or you haven't dealt with the fact that, like, every time that they you think they're not going along with your fantasy, you feel like lashing out at them. You know, it's like, well, look at that stuff, because it's stuff that can all be overcome, right? Like, it's like, maybe this situation that you're fantasizing about and drawn towards is there specifically to poke those things up and out of you, so that you can be the one who could be present with the reality of who you are. And if the reality of who you are is someone who tends to retaliate when they don't get their way, then that part of you needs to be comforted and loved by you. It's remained in your shadow until you're willing to look at it. And this situation just happens to be the thing that brought it up into your awareness. Every part is just awaiting your love. Like when I look at that, right? When I see somebody who's like that, I mean, yeah, it's not the ideal way to be. Yeah, like, that person's at war. And yeah, they're projecting the war out onto the person that they claim to love or like, right? Just out of rejection. It's like the time a guy asked me to go on a date, and I said, that I didn't want to. I don't remember the exact words. I was very polite, I didn't make him feel bad. I was like, I don't even know what I said, but it wasn't like mean or anything. I was just like, no, I don't think so, or I'm not interested at this time, or something like that, right? And then the guy starts giving me the finger. Like, he turned against me because he didn't get what he wanted out of me. So I went from being something that was desirable or interesting to him to being something that he hated and wanted to hurt. And it's like, well, which is it? Which is it? It's like, so when I look at people who do something like that, I have compassion for that now, because I too was like that. Before I healed, I was really angry at an ex-boyfriend when he led me on and breadcrumbed me and made me think that we were in a relationship when actually he was just keeping me as a side chick. I was really angry, and I really wanted to take him down, and I wanted to make him hurt. I wanted to make him regret what he did. But that was like a angry part of me that didn't have a healthy way to express our anger. And that is that's contrary to who I really am. So that was just a part of me that hadn't yet learned how to healthily, in an adult-like manner, process rejection, process disappointment, and process betrayal. And now I know how to do those things. Now, if someone betrays me, they cannot bring that up out of me anymore, because I just don't have it in me. Because now my view is, oh, that person is hurt. That person has some sort of issue where they think they have to lie to people to get their needs met. Like, oh, that's really sad. Like, I am the love that I gave. I haven't lost anything, really. Maybe some time. But now I'm also discerning. Now I discern, well, is this a relationship that is worth investing my time in? Do I have something to give to this relationship? I'm not going into relationships to try to get anymore. So if I don't get anything out of that relationship, I'm not hurt. I'm not feeling like I need to get it back from them. You know what I mean? So I have compassion when I see people in energies like this. And that was just an example. You may be living it out in some other way in your life, right? It doesn't have to be in the relationship realm. It could be in jobs. It could be in family. It could be just like, actually, that ex once told me that he wished that he won the lottery after his wife left him, because, then she would regret it. And I said, oh, I've had that thought too about you. And in retrospect, it's like, well, why would I want to be with someone who only wanted to be with me because I won the lottery? silly, right? So it's just our mind's way of trying to avoid feeling what we really feel, which is sadness and disappointment. And once we become the one who can be with ourselves and be present with our own sadness and disappointment and accept it for what it is, we'll move through that. It's not going to haunt us, and it's not going to mean that we have to develop a way of operating on the earth that makes us avoid those things at all costs. We're not going to have to cheat ourselves of other relationships that could be very fulfilling and much different than the one that we felt disappointed and saddened by. Like, we don't have to write everybody off and ourselves off from being in loving relationships just because, oops, we had expectations of someone and they didn't live up to them. Like, what we learn from that is like, why did I have expectations of them? What am I needing? What was I trying to get from that person? And is getting really part of loving? I think that love is more like giving. Love is a place we go to give, not get. So it's a matter of, is this a place where I want to give my love in an invested way? Now, in general, in passing, you could be a total stranger and I'll give my love if I have overflow to give. Now, am I going to continuously stick around and hang out with you every day if every time I give my love you kick me in the shin? Or you go around the corner and whisper about me behind my back and say, I've got them fooled, they're giving to me. Probably not. I'm probably just going to be like, oh, well, I'll just leave you some space so you can figure that out on your own, because I've already figured out that game and I don't want to play. It's just like that. Maturing. Okay, so just a heads up on something that may be uncomfortable to look at and is very human, I would say, right? And is very much part of the reason it would come to your awareness is because it's breaking down in this society. We're not going to be living like that anymore. That is just some of the old ways. So you're part of the cleanup crew here on Earth, right? You break the pattern of that happening and you become an example of someone who takes the high road. How beautiful. Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing that. And that's your reading. We're going to move on to pick number 2. Pick number 2. I just got a message while I was doing pick 1 and I just peeked at it while I was shuffling. Okay, we're good. It's just from my son. Verifying his ride on the weekend. Okay. Pick 2. What feelings are you suppressing? This is interesting. We got self-sabotage and then the word suppressed came out. So you may be actually unwilling to feel the pain that came with your parents' disapproval in some way, or your parents' inability to be present with you. At some point that caused sadness or disappointment. At some point in childhood, and it could have even been in very infant stages, it could have even been in preconception, but at some point you adopted a program of self-sabotage, and this meant that in your adapting to the environment that you were born into, you adopted a belief that you couldn't succeed past a certain point. So every time it looks like you're going to succeed past a certain point, there'll be some sort of self-sabotage that you do, and it may be completely unconscious. So you are not even aware that you are the one doing it. Like, you might not be aware that some certain gesture that you do, way that you dress, way that you speak to people, way that you avoid people, it could be, whatever, for whatever situation, But you are actually in control of this more than you think. Like, it's not just like you're a victim of circumstance. It's that your circumstances are literally being created from the energy you have within you. And it's, what you're experiencing in your hologram. And why it's there is because you don't realize that you have some self-sabotage. This could be, eating something really spicy late at night right before you go to bed, and then you've got heartburn and you can't sleep, and then you're late the next day. Or this could be spending time with people that you know aren't good for you. This could be deciding to go shopping instead of paying your bills. This could be not checking your oil in the car. This could be not returning the phone calls of any of your friends. This could be isolating. This could be just tripping when you're walking along, just tripping. So all of these kind of things are stemming from a self-sabotage, which is coming from this belief that you can't succeed, which actually you're not even aware of having. So let me just feel into how we would tackle this. I think first of all, acknowledging it. Like, if I'm talking about this and you're like, yeah, I could see that being the case, then first of all, you've got the first step. I just want to make sure that's not an ant on my back. You've acknowledged. Now, validation is the next one. So if you can think of a reason why you might have adopted the belief that you couldn't succeed in a certain area, maybe you sabotage your relationships because you didn't see any successful marriage ever in your life. Maybe you sabotage yourself at work because you actually hate that job. Maybe you sabotage your friendships because when you were growing up, you got teased a lot and you don't really trust anyone. Maybe you sabotage your relationships because you got isolated when you were a child and you were put in your room alone for long periods of time, and now it's just what feels comfortable, and it feels like being alone is more comfortable. And it's only because you adapted your beliefs to cope with the reality you were living, which may or may not have been fair. So it's now time to validate yourself. Now, if this happened in infancy based on the fact that your mother didn't actually have high self-esteem or whatever, and so you got this kind of being programmed for survival and not succeeding sometimes because of the fears that your mother harbored when she was pregnant with you, this is something where you're going to have to get into therapy possibly and really work on it over time to build up trust in yourself and relationships. And it's just a step-by-step process, but like acknowledging it and it is a great first step for you. And it's saying like, if this is something that you have to really invest a lot of time on working on in yourself, then this is something that your soul wanted to experience on that level, right? On the level of really studying it, really looking at it, really seeing the causes and seeing what solutions exist for that, because there are solutions. One way is to maybe just slow down and notice the patterns, notice when it's happening, notice what thoughts you're having before it. If you can identify any of those details, then you might be able to alleviate it from those places, right, in your thoughts. If you can change one of those things, thoughts, behaviors, or feelings, if you can identify a pattern in any of those things, you can change it, right? So you may be able to even adapt this behavior while you're working on alleviating the trauma or the energy within yourself. So after validate is accept. So you can also just accept that it's there. Accept that you have that self-sabotage program. Because once you accept it, you're at least at the place where you're not fighting against it. You're not suppressing it anymore. It's in the awareness. And at that point, you're that much closer to letting it go. So acceptance is an important step. And what might set it free, without even doing all that background work, without even going to a counselor, it might set it free to just be the one who loves yourself even though you sabotage yourself. How about that? What if at the same time you were sabotaging yourself, you were also saving yourself from something else? Right? So, the feelings that are being suppressed have to do with some just like disapproval for self, self-hate, self-loathing, fear that you're not good enough or that you can't handle it, fear of being left behind. So just like feeling left out. Also, there may be fears around success, around getting too much attention, because that could have got you in trouble when you were a kid too. If you got punished because you were loud and you made jokes and your mouth got you in trouble because you cracked a witty line every time, dad was being mean to someone, you may have ended up suppressing the part of you that is willing to stand out and be noticed. You may have written that part off, and that could be a self-sabotage in itself, because it's hiding who you really are, which makes you miss opportunities that are meant for you and your soul's evolution. That would only succeed if you were in your true authentic nature of being exuberant and willing to be seen. Okay, so there are a lot of different ways that sabotage can play out for you, and I've named some of the examples of the ways. So I think it's important for some of you to just kind of do the self-inquiry, to get into a meditation and to ask and you shall receive, right? Ask and then listen to what examples are shown to you, and ask what you can do about it if you're still concerned. Okay? All right, pick 2. You're doing great. Thanks for being here. I'm going to move on to pick 3. Pick 3. What feelings are you suppressing? Okay, we got power struggle, a mystery, and fantasy. Interesting. So, feelings of inferiority, feelings that you'll be overpowered, victimized, feelings of like lack in the way that like if you think that somebody else being successful threatens you. Fear, okay, here's one. The feeling of being out of control. So say you are looking to be in a relationship with someone who needs you, and this is a power struggle way of relating. So you imagine that if they need you, then they won't leave you because you'll be providing them with something valuable. What that means really is that you don't feel that you have enough value to offer them in just being good company in the authentic version of you that exists. Now I understand that it gets a little cloudy when we're looking at like the role of men, but I strongly believe that in this society at this time, like we've evolved, right? And we're trying to come into balance. So women and men, and those who don't identify for whatever reasons, but women and men are looking to be balanced in their masculine and feminine energy. So nowadays, a woman can also protect herself. But when you come in relationship with another, like if I'm a woman and I'm balanced in my masculine and feminine, and I come into a relationship with a man who's balanced in his masculine and feminine, then yes, he could take the role of being protector. but I can also protect myself, right? He doesn't have to do that for me to like him. He's completely whole and I'm completely whole. And we can be interdependent, meaning we count on each other for things sometimes when it's appropriate and not when the other person can't handle it, you know? Not because we're entitled to it, but out of care. And it's not required for love to exist. You know what I mean? It's not conditionally loving. It's love is who we are, balanced is what we are, sovereign is what we are. And we don't need anyone to be different. We don't need anyone to do for us. We don't need anyone to think of us a certain way. We don't need to prove ourselves to other people. We don't need to provide services for people to be valuable or valued by them. We know that we are each imbued with a intrinsic value. So we don't lose our value when someone else is valuable. We each have the capacity to obtain our desires by lining up with our true authentic self. So when somebody else has something that we want, we don't have to fight them for it. We can just work within ourselves to line up for that for ourselves. There's no war, there's no power struggle there's no imbalances if we all become sovereign, balanced within ourselves, giving ourselves what we need first before we go out to look for that resource outside of ourselves. And when we do that, only going to someone that we know is filled up in themselves, is balanced in themselves, and has the capacity, right? Like, I have someone in my life who was in a role where we could support each other. But this person has been going through some difficulties that has them a bit off balanced, and I can see that. And so I'm not putting anything on them. I'm not asking them to have a conversation with me about anything that I'm working on. I'm not putting extra on that person because they don't have it to give. And that's the kind, loving thing to do. That's because I care about that person, right? That person doesn't need to perform for me or be that in that support to me, that supportive role to me, to prove they care about me. No, they have nothing to prove. They never have to prove it. The only thing that could break our relationship apart is if that person like turned against me and tried to take me down to their level while they were struggling. If that person said, "Oh, well, I'm really struggling and she's not struggling, so I'm gonna have to notice some flaws about her and mention them slyly, or I'm gonna have to like talk to other people about how awful she is to make sure that they think so too," or like if she started coming at me with those kind of energies, or even like behind my back with those kind of energies, I would feel that, and I would just be like, okay, well, this has turned sour. Now this is about power, and our power is really not supposed to be, or doesn't need to be used to overcome each other anymore. That was in the past. We learned what we had to learn from that. Now our power is used to sustain ourselves, to navigate our life within our own energy and our own selves. That's what our power is used for. Our power is used to advance ourselves when we see something that we want that we don't have. Our power is used to heal ourselves when we find ourselves envious of others. Our power is meant to regulate ourselves when we are dealing with an emotion like anger, so that we don't inappropriately express anger that in a way that causes harm to ourselves or another, right? Our power is what we use to make sure we're not harming ourselves or others. That's what power is. That's what power is, right? So why is this element of fantasy here? Okay, so I think that it's easy to fall into that fantasy of being more powerful, of people needing your help, of or of even needing other people's help. You can even have a fantasy about being the victim and being saved and rescued. And anytime you step into the role of needing to be rescued, of rescuing, or of persecuting another, you are in a power struggle. That's called the drama triangle: victim, savior, and persecutor. And any one of those roles are imbalanced, and they are going to shift, right? The victim can become the persecutor, the rescuer can become the persecutor. Say the victim is wanting to be cared for, but the rescuer is like, well, do this to help yourself. Then the victim gets mad at the rescuer and says, no, I just want you to care about me and take care of me. I don't want you to tell me how to fix it myself. So all of a sudden that victim turned into the persecutor. Or the rescuer rescues the victim. And then they start thinking, well, wait a minute here. You don't even appreciate that I just rescued you. I just went out of my way for you. Now all of a sudden, the rescuer has become the persecutor. Okay? So anytime we're relating in those dynamics of victim, savior, we have that risk of becoming persecutor or becoming persecuted. And that's how we know it's a power struggle, a way of relating. So any fantasies that have to do with, those type themes in any of our relationships, whether it be work, family, with our children, siblings, co-workers, I guess I already covered when I said work, marriage partners, friends, it's no place for the power struggle. The power struggle indicates that there's a dysfunctional way of relating, active. And whenever that's the case, we're not going to get to where we need to go. Hold on one sec. Okay. Sorry about that. I know I was closing it up anyway, but I just wanted to come back and do a proper goodbye. Adventure awaits, guys. Okay? Get out there and do life. Thank you for watching the video, for participating, reflecting. I know these are difficult topics, but this is all just human nature. And basically what we're doing is like looking at the ways that we've been sort of like trapped, because like those ways of relating keep us in a loop of doing the same thing over and over again, sometimes with different people, but it's always the same story. And we don't really need to learn anything else from those patterns. Those patterns, we know what they do, we know all the angles. If we don't know it, somebody else knows it. And we know that it's like, okay, like there's more, there's bigger, better, more freer stuff for us to participate in as humans on Earth at this time. And these topics, this talking about it is a way that we can free ourselves to live the life where we don't have to like feel angry when someone doesn't meet our expectation or feel entitled to somebody's care, that we are the one who cares for ourselves. And it's like, how great is that? Like wherever you go, wherever I walk, my best caretaker is with me. Wherever I go, the one who's in charge of my happiness is here. Like, wherever I go, I know there's a solution for anything I am challenged with. So I walk in peace and calm and faith. And that's because I'm no longer tangled up with what I need from other people, with what other people need from me. When I enter into an experience with a person, I try to go with, this is the first time we're doing this. This is the first time of experiencing this person like this. You know? Do you feel how beautiful and fresh that is? It's not holding on to past baggage or anything like that. And it doesn't mean that I'm not discerning. Now, if I've had pretty bad experiences, or experiences that were harmful to me in the past with somebody, I don't hate them. I'm not holding a grudge, but I'm also like not necessarily gonna seek them out to hang out with them or whatever, you know what I mean? If they came to me with apologies and things like that, and I could feel that it was genuine, and I could understand that they really had understood, you know, that how they were was kind of limiting and dark and not fair, you know, I would definitely like deal with somebody like that. But people who are not, people who are kind of stuck in their fear and illusions, you know, sometimes I do have to be discerning to take space from that, because people who are self-sabotaging, people who are lashing out because you don't meet their expectations, it's not pleasant, you know? So once we get away from this power struggle relating, we don't have to deal with that anymore. Like, so I feel a little like in my gut, and I'm just kind of assessing what that phone call was and how it plays into this message, because it's interesting. It was someone asking to spend time with me, but asking me to help them. But when they asked, they were like, don't worry, I can ask someone else. And this is someone I could ask for help if I needed it. And it's also like not even a big deal. And I feel like it was something that I wanted to do with them, because I can still do what I needed to do. Like, my schedule has an opening right after I do what I needed to do to fill my cup up. Then I can do that with them. And it's kind of like an adventure, because it's like, oh, well, like, I'm going to be doing something that I hadn't planned on doing, but all my needs are met. I do have an opening in my schedule, and I'll be around some air conditioning. That sounds kind of nice, you know, like. So what is it? Now, if I were to have held on to past grudges, I might not have even taken that phone call. You know? It's like that. Like, I have full forgiveness for people who are growing and learning. Let me just see what this feeling is within me. I mean, I don't know. I gotta dig at it, right? This is what I do. Now I'm gonna do it with you. I really listen to my body. My body tells me. It's my navigation system. It tells me if something's off. Deceived, deceptive, longing, and conformity. Oh. That person wanted to spend time with me. They didn't need anything. They just wanted to spend time with me. And instead of just saying that, they asked me for a very, very small, insignificant favor. Oh. And this person actually probably does talk behind my back. It's possible because I got defamation. Okay, yeah. The pain, the little discomfort in my solar plexus just eased up as soon as I said that. As soon as I read that into the energy and felt that, like, as the truth. Okay. It's a betrayal to myself to do it, and it's out of my comfort zone to clarify that I don't want to do it. Okay, so in me, for my life right now, this instance is bringing up an example of something that I can clear. And actually, I'm not going to cancel it. I'm going to use the opportunity to have a conversation that lets go of the old grudge, because there was something that happened between me and this person, and then we never really resolved it. Like, time passed, and it was just kind of let go of by me. I healed it, or so I thought. Oh, I did heal it, but what I haven't done is had the conversation with them to see if they healed it. They may not have healed it. And it's still brushed under their carpet. And now this is life, the universe, asking me, hey, can you be brave? Can you have that uncomfortable conversation? Can you help everyone get rid of that grudge? Yeah. Yeah, I can. I can. I trust myself. I know that a conversation like that is something that I'm equipped to have. And interesting. All right, so when we're talking about power struggle and fantasy, right? If I were to say, okay, I'm going to go have this conversation with this person, then they're going to be like, wow, thank you for freeing me. And then, that would be a fantasy, right? And that means that I would have expectations of them, and I would be attached to an outcome, meaning I would expect them to resolve the grudge and be thankful, right? That is power struggle relating. Instead, when I go into a situation like this, what I have to do is be not attached to the outcome, meaning I have no control over whether this person wants to let go of old grudges or wants to have this conversation or not. I can't force them, and either way, I'm fine, right? Either way, I'm fine. But there's a conversation to be had. I can at least be the one who presents the opportunity to have that conversation. Now, if that person doesn't want to have that conversation, that's what it is, right? Sometimes I've been in other relationships or, interactions with people where I'll say God, but whatever, universe, source, whatever, where spirit has prompted me to present an opportunity for a conversation and been rejected. And then again and again and again, like with one particular person who I'm thinking of, he rejected my opportunities for conversation so many times, and God is still asking me to have conversations with this man. And I think it's just part of our soul contract that I would just show this this unconditional bond, that this person doesn't have to respond any certain way, and I'm still this person willing to have the conversation that we agreed to have when we were souls. It's not personal, even though in the beginning, when I was being rejected, it served me too, because then I got to deal with the part of me that did take it personal. I cried a lot. I felt terrible. My self-esteem took a big hit, because when God was telling me, or when Spirit was telling me to have these conversations, and then I was being rejected, I was like thinking, I can't even trust God anymore. I almost lost my faith over it, because I just didn't understand. And now I understand, because now I know myself, and now I know who I am, and I don't need God to tell me, because he showed me by giving me experiences where I could find out, where I could cry out the stuff that was a lie, like thinking it was personal when somebody didn't want to have a conversation that God thought we should have. It's not personal. It doesn't mean anything about me. It doesn't mean I'm lesser or not good enough or anything like that. So once I shed all that, then I'm just like me. Then I'm just like, oh, well, my value doesn't change when someone doesn't want to have the conversation that we have an opportunity to have. So when I go into this opportunity to have a conversation about an old grudge with someone who I care about, that's why I do it, right? Because I care. Then I don't have expectations. I don't need them to do it a certain way, and I don't have an attachment to the outcome, meaning we could have the conversation and then decide that we're no longer compatible, in friendship, and like part ways. That could happen, right? Or we come closer because we've now had the ability to clear out any of the junk, the baggage that was between keeping us apart. It's like that. Yeah. So maybe there's a reason why this example had to be brought into this reading, for you to kind of just see an example of that power struggle playing out and what it looks like in these type of situations. So I hope that is helpful for you. And I am going to go fill up my own cup so I can go on a little adventure with a friend. See you next time.